She had just $12.43 in her apron pocket. Two little kids were sound asleep in a daycare she still owed money for, and her landlord. He'd just taped an eviction notice to her locker door. Tonight everything was on a knife's edge. A man in clothes so torn they barely hung together would walk and order the cheapest soup on the menu, and then with a sigh claim he'd lost his wallet. In that single, impossible moment, she'd have to make a choice: protect her last few precious dollars, the last barrier between her family and the streets, or protect a complete stranger's dignity. What she couldn't possibly know, what would shock her to her core, was that the tattered coat belonged to Thomas Kellner, a billionaire worth a staggering $3.8 billion. And he wasn't just ordering soup because he was hungry. He was starving for proof that genuine kindness, the kind that doesn't ask for anything in return, still exists in a world that often feels cold and transactional. This wasn't just a meal. It was a test, and the stakes were higher than anyone could imagine. Hey everyone, it's Alex, and before we dive into this incredible story, let's hit you with a quick reality check. A recent University of California study dropped a bombshell: single mothers are a shocking 37% more likely to face food insecurity than any other demographic in the States. Let that sink in for a second. 37%. Grace Williams, a powerhouse of a woman at 29, a single mom with two beautiful babies, and absolutely zero support system, knew those odds better than anyone. She lived them shift after grueling shift at Mel's 24-hour diner, clinging to the gritty edge of Detroit. Every single morning before the sun even thought about rising, she'd braid her daughter's hair, pack the same humble peanut butter sandwich, half for her, half for the kids, and whisper a silent promise to herself. If she just smiled enough, worked hard enough, maybe, just maybe, the numbers would finally add up. But they never did. Rent, daycare, the relentless climb of gas prices. They all kept soaring, always faster than the meager tips left under coffee-stained checks. Yet talk to any of Mel's regulars, and they'll tell you the first thing they noticed about Grace wasn't the worn-out shoes or the faint circles under her eyes. It was the way she greeted even the surliest, most cantankerous customer, like they were the only person on earth, like their day truly mattered to her. Meanwhile, across town, in a world that felt light years away, Thomas Kellner, real estate mogul, a permanent fixture on the Forbes list, a man who could buy and sell entire neighborhoods before breakfast, was drowning in the exact opposite problem. Money for him had long stopped being a source of joy or even comfort. It had become a heavy, suffocating blanket. He could effortlessly buy Mel's diner, buy the entire block, probably the whole district if he felt like it. But what he couldn't buy was the certainty that people saw him, the man, not just his staggering net worth. He yearned for genuine connection, for an interaction untainted by the shadow of his wealth. So one crisp morning, he swapped his custom-tailored cashmere coat for a thrift store jacket with a stubbornly broken zipper. He left the gleaming Bentley in his garage, opting instead for the anonymity of public transport. And with one burning question echoing in the cavernous space of his mind, he walked into Mel's. If I strip away every single trapping of wealth, every symbol of power and status, will anyone truly feed me when I'm hungry? Will anyone see me, the human being, and extend a hand? He would ask only once in his own unique way, and the answer, delivered by a struggling waitress, would change not just two lives, but countless others forever. It was a gamble, a desperate plea for humanity in a world. Grace's alarm didn't just ring. It screamed a shrill, insistent siren cutting through the pre-dawn silence at 4:47 a.m., same as every single day. She groaned, rolling off the threadbare couch that served as her bed, deftly folding the thin blanket that by night doubled as the makeshift wall, separating her bedroom from the living space. She moved like a phantom, tiptoeing past the twins, their small, innocent forms curled up in the studio apartment's only actual bedroom, oblivious to the relentless grind their mother endured. 17 steps. She knew the exact count to the tiny kitchenette. There she measured coffee grounds not by a missing spoon that had snapped last month, but by instinct, by the rich, dark color that promised a jolt of caffeine. While the ancient pot gurgled a comforting, rhythmic sound in the quiet apartment, her gaze drifted to the envelope stuck to the fridge. "Final notice!" It shrieked in angry red capital letters, a brutal reminder of the late rent, the looming threat of displacement. She sighed, stuffing it behind a magnet shaped like a smiling sun. The irony of it was so thick, she could almost taste the bitterness. By 5:30, she was clocking in at Mel's, her shoulders already aching, tying the apron that carried yesterday's meager tips and today's only sliver of hope. Marty, the night manager, a man whose patience was as thin as his hair, barked at her to refill the ketchup bottles before she'd even had a chance to hang her purse. "Yes, sir," she answered, her voice soft, practiced a balm to his perpetual gruffness. The first customer, a burly trucker, wanted coffee black, and the road-weary look in his eyes screamed that he'd needed it yesterday. She poured, she smiled, and she didn't charge for the refill, even though she knew Marty would later count every single cup like a hawk-eyed miser, ready to dock her pay for any perceived transgression. Across the sprawling city, in a penthouse apartment that offered panoramic views of the very streets Grace was navigating, Thomas Kellner stood in front of his walk-in mirror. He shrugged into a fraying army surplus coat, its fabric rough against his skin, a stark contrast to the silken linings he was accustomed to. He deliberately left his gleaming Rolex on the dresser, a small, defiant act of shedding his identity. Into the coat's pocket he slid a battered wallet containing precisely 3 singles and a maxed-out grocery store loyalty card. A perfect prop for the part he was about to play. No chauffeur today. He took the city bus, a mode of transport he hadn't touched since his undergrad days, and watched, fascinated as people instinctively avoided eye contact with the man in torn denim, the man who looked like he had nothing. Funny, he mused to himself, a wry twist to his lips. The less you have, the more invisible you become. It was a profound observation, cutting deeper than he'd anticipated. He got off 2 stops past the diner, choosing to walk the rest of the way, wanting the gnawing pang of hunger to settle in, to sharpen his senses, to give him an edge of authenticity for the elaborate charade he was about to perform. By 6:15, he pushed open Mel's glass door, the bell jingling overhead, a cheerful sound that felt oddly out of place with his somber mission. The warm, comforting smell of griddled hash browns and stale coffee enveloped him. Grace, a whirlwind of motion, was expertly balancing 4 plates on one arm, her smile bright and unwavering. "Good morning, welcome to Mel's, grab any seat you like," she greeted him, her voice as warm and welcoming as if he were the mayor himself. He chose the corner booth under the flickering neon sign sliding across the cracked vinyl and waited. The test was about to begin. The fate of his faith in humanity and a struggling waitress's life hung in the balance. Grace approached his booth, her pen perched casually behind her ear, looking almost like a makeshift, slightly quirky flower. "What can I get started for you?" she asked, her voice carrying that same genuine warmth unaffected by the early hour or the man's disheveled appearance. Thomas rubbed his stomach, a slightly theatrical gesture, playing the part perfectly. "The menu says the split pea cup is $2.50, right?" he mumbled, his eyes darting around like a man uncomfortable drawing attention. "Yep. Comes with a roll," Grace confirmed, already reaching for her order pad. He pulled out the battered wallet, making sure she caught a glimpse of the lonely singles nestled inside. That's "That's everything I've got until my disability check comes in, supposed to be next week," he said, his voice laced with a practiced embarrassment. "I'm really sorry to ask, but is there any way you could do just half a cup? I'll still tip what I can, of course." Grace didn't flinch. Not a flicker of judgment, not a hint of annoyance. Her expression remained soft, empathetic. "Tell you what, honey," she said, a gentle smile touching her lips, "the soup's on me today, and you look like you could definitely use the full cup plus some crackers to go with it." She scribbled on the ticket, tearing it off before he could even register a protest. It was done. Behind the counter, Marty was too busy flirting clumsily with the new hostess, completely oblivious to Grace's quiet act of generosity. Thomas, meanwhile, studied her name tag. Grace. He thought, how cliché, and yet how utterly perfect. While the kitchen staff ladled out the steaming soup, she brought him a glass of iced water. No lemon. A small detail he appreciated, knowing lemon often cost extra. She even asked if he needed anything for the road, a thoughtful gesture that surprised him. He shook his head, eyes downcast, maintaining his carefully crafted persona. When the bowl arrived, steam curling invitingly, she set it down gently, almost reverently. "Eat slow, it's hot," she warned, her voice a comforting murmur. He took a spoonful, the taste a simple blend of salt and memory. But it was more than just food. It was sustenance for his soul. Across the bustling room, two construction workers erupted into a loud argument about overtime, their voices rising, threatening to shatter the diner's fragile peace. Grace, ever the peacemaker, moved swiftly to de-escalate, returning to Thomas's booth moments later with a pair of to-go boxes. "I wrapped up some cornbread for you, okay?" she offered, her voice still kind. "It's day old, but it's still really good, I promise." He watched her walk away, a strange, unfamiliar warmth spreading through his chest, a knot he hadn't even known was there beginning to loosen. When the check finally arrived, it read a bold, unequivocal $0. She'd rung it up under employee meal, a quiet sacrifice that meant Marty would almost certainly deduct the cost from her already meager wages, like the miser Thomas knew him to be. Thomas carefully folded the receipt, slipping it into the ripped lining of his coat. It wasn't just a receipt. It was evidence, proof of a kindness that transcended circumstance, a powerful piece in the puzzle he was trying to solve. The lunch rush hit Mel's like a tidal wave, a chaotic symphony of clattering plates, shouted orders, and the incessant clang of the service bell. Grace was everywhere at once, a blur of motion, flying from table to table, refilling coffee, smiling genuinely at tired faces, and offering heartfelt apologies for the cook's perpetually heavy hand on the fryer. Thomas lingered, observing her with an almost scientific detachment, yet feeling an undeniable pull towards her unwavering grace under pressure. He watched her handle demanding customers, spilled drinks, and the relentless pace with a calm that bordered on miraculous. Then, at precisely 12:40, a man in a sharply tailored suit, clearly not a regular, clearly not from this blue-collar neighborhood, stormed in. Cell phone glued to his ear, he strode directly to the counter, demanding a gluten-free omelet, faster than humanly possible, his impatience radiating like heat. Grace, despite the palpable tension, maintained her composure. She punched in the order, her fingers flying across the keypad, and offered him coffee while he waited. The suit guy scoffed a sneer, twisting his lips. "Do I look like I drink diner coffee?" he spat, turning his back dismissively, as if her offer were an insult. Minutes later, he snapped his fingers imperiously, his voice cutting through the diner's din. "Server, my time is money. Where's my food?" Grace, her jaw tight, apologized again, checked with the kitchen, and returned with the plate. He took a bite, grimaced theatrically, and shoved the plate back towards her, nearly sending it crashing to the floor. "This has cheese, I said, no dairy." He barked, his voice loud enough to silence the entire room, drawing every eye. Grace, quick as a flash, caught the plate before it could shatter. "I am so incredibly sorry, sir," she said, her voice strained but steady. "We can remake it for you right away. Forget it, you incompetent fool!" He roared, his face purpling with rage. He threw a crumpled $5 bill onto the table, a pathetic insult of a tip, and stalked out, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. Marty, seemingly conjured from thin air, materialized beside Grace, his face a mask of purple fury. "Williams, what in God's name are you trying to do? Kill my business? Apologize next time. The customer is always right." Thomas watched Grace swallow the harsh reprimand, her eyes glassy with unshed tears, but her chin remained defiantly high. She didn't crumble. She absorbed it, her spirit unbroken. There it is, Thomas thought, a profound realization settling over him. Character under pressure, like carbon turning to diamond. He knew then, without a shadow of a doubt, that his initial assessment of her was correct. He left the diner without a word, but not without a trace. On the table, where the zeroed-out receipt had once been, he left a meticulously folded paper crane. It was a silent promise, a coded message of recognition and respect for the woman who embodied true strength and dignity. He knew he would be back, but next time he wouldn't be testing her. He'd be helping her rise. The next evening, Thomas returned to Mel's. This time there was a subtle but significant difference. He was showered, his hair neatly combed, and he wore a simple yet crisp button-down shirt that, while unassuming, hinted at a quiet confidence. The broken zipper jacket was gone. He had deliberately dialed down his usual billionaire swagger, aiming for an air of humble approachability. He gravitated instinctively to the same corner booth, a familiar anchor in the bustling diner. Grace, caught up in the evening rush, didn't recognize him at first. Yesterday's scruffy beard and disheveled hair had effectively hidden the sharp angles of his cheekbones, the piercing intelligence in his eyes. She greeted him with the same fresh, genuine smile she offered every new customer. "Well, look who's back," she chirped, a hint of playful recognition in her voice. "Cup of split pea," perhaps, she joked, remembering his previous memorable order. He chuckled, a genuine warm sound this time. "Actually," he replied, settling into the cracked vinyl coffee, "and your meatloaf special sounds absolutely perfect tonight." She tapped the order into her pad, a small smile playing on her lips. While they waited for his food, he engaged her in casual conversation, probing gently, carefully. He asked about her day, about her life, a genuine curiosity replacing his earlier detached observation. She in turn spoke openly, without a trace of self-pity. Her words simply facts wrapped in an unwavering optimism. She mentioned the twins, the relentless eviction notice, the way peanut butter sandwiches, no matter how lovingly made, just get old after the fourth week in a row. It was a stark, honest glimpse into her daily struggle, her quiet resilience shining through every detail. He listened intently, absorbing every word. "Do you ever think about leaving?" he asked, leaning forward slightly, his voice soft. "Finding something better?" Grace paused, her gaze drifting towards the rain-streaked window. Sure, she admitted, a wistful note in her voice. "Every single day. But rent's due here, you know. And dreams. Dreams cost bus fare, and a first-month deposit, and a whole lot of courage. I don't always feel like I have." He nodded slowly, a profound understanding dawning on him. He then pulled a business card from his wallet, a wallet that now felt reassuringly thick with possibility, not just a few lonely singles. On the back, in his own precise hand, he'd pre-written a simple, powerful note. "Kindness is never wasted." He handed it to her. "Read this later," he instructed gently, "when you're off shift, when you have a moment to yourself." She tucked it into her apron pocket, a puzzled but polite expression on her face, clearly unsure what to make of this mysterious gesture. When the check finally came, he paid with a crisp $100 bill, then told her to keep the change. She tried to refuse, her eyes wide. The tip was bigger than the entire tab, but he insisted, a determined glint in his eye. "Invest it in tomorrow, Grace," he urged. "Invest it in a better tomorrow." He left, then his heart thumping with a quiet exhilaration, knowing that tomorrow her entire script would be flipped. He had witnessed her spirit, her unwavering humanity, and now it was time to change her world. The morning shift dawned no different from any other for Grace, except for the frantic energy radiating from Marty. She found him pacing the diner floor, practically giddy, his usual gruff demeanor replaced by an almost manic excitement. "Some hotshot investors buying the place," he announced, practically vibrating with anticipation. "Wants to meet the staff, look sharp." "Williams." Grace rolled her eyes, tied her apron, and braced herself for another long, exhausting day, assuming it was just another rich guy buying another struggling business. Then, at precisely 8 a.m., a sleek black sedan, the kind that whispered wealth rather than shouting, it glided to a stop outside Mel's. Out stepped Thomas, no longer in his thrift store disguise, but in a perfectly tailored coat, the kind that screamed bespoke luxury. It was the face the world knew from countless magazine covers, from business news channels. Gasps rippled through the diner. Marty, usually so stiff, nearly curtsied his servile deference, a stark contrast to his usual treatment of Grace. Thomas, with an air of quiet authority, requested the same corner booth, then, with a directness that made Grace's stomach clench, specifically asked for her. She approached, a wave of confused déjà vu washing over her. The eyes, the kind smile. It was him, but utterly transformed. He looked up, his smile gentle, almost tender. "Yesterday," he began, his voice calm, resonant, "you fed a man who couldn't pay. You treated him with dignity when others would have turned away. Today, Grace, I'd like to repay that debt." He reached into the inner pocket of his impeccable jacket, pulling out a thick, official-looking envelope. He slid it across the table towards her, its weight feeling immense in her trembling hands. Inside, nestled amongst crisp papers, was a check made out to her for $50,000, enough to wipe away her debts and then some. There was also a letter, sealed with a prestigious university's emblem, offering a full MBA scholarship. And then a set of keys. Real keys. These keys, Thomas explained, his voice soft but firm, are for a 3-bedroom house. The mortgage is already paid in full, and it's located in your children's school district, just like you told me you dreamed of. Tears, hot and fast, streamed down her cheeks, hitting the table before any words could escape her choked throat. Marty, who had been hovering, stammered, his voice filled with incredulity and a touch of jealousy. "Sir, you can't be serious." "She's just a waitress." Thomas turned, his eyes narrowing, his voice hardening to steel. "She's the reason, Marty, that customers will drive past 20 other diners just to reach this one. She's the asset you almost crushed with your short-sightedness and your cruelty." He then turned back to Grace, his expression softening once more. "There's also a position waiting for you, Grace, directing my foundation's community outreach. Starting salary is 6 figures, plus a generous daycare stipend. No pressure, of course. Whatever you choose, know this: those children will never again wonder where home is." Grace sobbed deep, shuddering sobs, but laughter soon mixed in like sunlight breaking through a storm. Customers who had been listening in hushed awe erupted into applause. Some even openly wept, moved by the raw emotion of the moment. Marty stood small, shrunken, suddenly and acutely aware of just how cheap and ugly cruelty looks when exposed in the bright, unforgiving light of day. A week later, boxes packed and taped. Grace stood in the doorway of the cramped studio apartment for the very last time. The air hummed with a different kind of silence now, one filled with possibility, not despair. The twins, their little faces alight with excitement, raced through the empty rooms, their joyful shouts echoing off the bare walls. She carefully locked the door, a symbolic closure to a chapter of hardship, and slipped the key under the landlord's door, along with a short, poignant note. Thanks for the push. The new house. A charming 3-bedroom with a small, sun-drenched yard, smelled of fresh paint and the promise of forever. It was more than a house. It was a sanctuary. Grace immediately threw herself into her online MBA prep, studying late into the night after the kids were finally asleep. Her eyes burned with fatigue, but her spirit was incandescent, fueled by a purpose she hadn't dared to dream of before. Thomas, true to his word, kept in touch, a mentor who quickly became a trusted friend. He attended her graduation 2 years later, cheering the loudest when she, diploma in hand, crossed the stage, a picture of triumph and grace. Under her visionary leadership, Thomas's foundation blossomed. It opened 5 vital resource centers serving over 10,000 families, in need, a testament to her innate empathy and fierce determination. She never forgot her roots at the diner. Her very first initiative was to fund employee meals, ensuring that no server would ever again have to pay for another's act of kindness. And Marty, he eventually got bought out, his petty reign over Mel's ending not with a bang, but a whimper. The diner was renovated, revitalized, and rebranded as Grace's Place. Though she, with characteristic humility, insisted the original name Mel's be kept for nostalgia, a nod to its history, and the place where her life had truly begun. Profits soared. It turns out respect and genuine care for people are incredibly good business. Every Thanksgiving, without fail, Grace returns to that very corner booth at Mel's. She orders a cup of split pea soup, leaves a crisp $100 tip, and just as Thomas had done for her, leaves a meticulously folded paper crane on the table. New staff, unfamiliar with the legend, often ask why. She just smiles a knowing, radiant smile and simply says, tradition. Across town in his sprawling minimalist office, Thomas Kellner still keeps the torn army coat hanging on a prominent hook. It serves as a constant, tangible reminder that identity isn't defined by fabric or by a financial figure, but by action, by the choices we make when no one is watching. Both Grace and Thomas carry the profound lesson from that fateful day. The smallest act of kindness extended without expectation can echo into an entire empire of good, touching countless lives in ways unimaginable. It was a test of character and humanity in its purest form, passed with flying colors. If this story, this incredible journey of Grace and Thomas, warmed you even a little, do me a favor. Take a moment, look for the grace in your own day. It might be paying for a stranger's coffee just because. It might be tipping like you just hit the jackpot, even if you're just getting by. It might be speaking up with quiet courage when cruelty, in whatever form, wears a suit and thinks it's untouchable. Then come back here to the comments section and tell us about it. I promise you, I read every single one. Hit that like button so YouTube knows you're hungry for more real-life kindness explosions, for stories that remind us of the good in the world. Share this video with someone who thinks the world's gone cold, someone who needs a little spark of hope. Let's prove them wrong together. And hey, don't forget to subscribe and turn on those notifications, because next week we're following the incredible story of a quiet janitor who secretly funded students' lunches, and the surprise that completely knocked him off his feet. Kindness isn't just a nice gesture, it's contagious. Let's start an epidemic, shall we? Today, Grace's kids chase fireflies in a backyard they call unequivocally theirs, their laughter echoing under the stars. She signs her emails Director of Possibility, a title she embodies with every fiber of her being. Thomas, no longer plagued by doubts about loyalty or genuine human connection, witnesses it nightly in the warm, inviting glow of the Mel's Diner sign, now a beacon of hope. And somewhere in another diner, another waitress counting her meager change hears a story like this and decides against all odds to cover one more bowl of soup for a stranger. That's the ripple effect. That's the true immeasurable reward. Remember, this poverty of circumstance can be temporary. It can be overcome. But the poverty of spirit, that cold, isolating indifference to another's struggle, that is the real homelessness. Feed each other with food, with kindness, with hope, and nobody stays hungry long.